been given access to receive messages of clarity, guidance, and love. As channeler, psychotherapist, and author, Noemi Grace has an intimate dialogue with the divine on your behalf. Lisa Berry, creator of the show Light on Living, will be co-hosting as live callers ask their burning question on self-love, self-healing, deepening relationships, areas of struggle, and next steps. By simply listening in, you're receiving wisdom that will lead to sacred stability from every channeled message that Noemi delivers. Join us now as we give you access to angels and grace. Well, hello, everyone. Hello, Noemi.
Hello, Lisa. So lovely to be here again, as always, really.
It is. As we've moved from we've progressed from the womb series into I feel like ego is, in a beautiful way, is taking over and really wants to be in the spotlight so that there's a better relationship with it.
Yes, and it's living from your true power source too. So it's the relationship between the truth of who you are and ego. So you're not split. You have all of you working together, interacting together, coming together to be all of you.
Yes, actually, it's funny when you said that about not split in two or not these things. And sometimes people might sit back and think, gosh, am I schizophrenic? Am I having multiple personalities? Why am I so strong in attitude and beliefs one way, but then the next time, all over the map? And so that's actually, I'm excited for that to show up today's episode. We have so much to go from. But Noemi, the pre-channeled message, which you guys, I get to listen to. I get to pre-listen to the pre-channeled message.
A lot of pre going on.
Yes. But I really felt that was a good foundation to even start today's episode. There's just so much in it, and I thought it was so beautifully, Source always comes through, words it beautifully, because it in that message, and I'd love for you to read that, is, as I was listening, I thought, wow, there's a lot of points that we really need to go in on there. It's almost like we get to look at ego as a friend. So I would love for you
and they talk about ego as being your ally. And so that while you're not your ego, that's not all of you. In the last show, they talked about the cake and the icing on the cake, that the top layer, you can consider that ego. Icing is pretty sweet stuff. Some people just like the icing.
Yes, Noemi does, right? Yes.
No. Well, my grandmother, she used to make this really, tasty, from the chocolate, which lots of sugar and everything. This chocolate icing that was like we could have just eaten the whole bowl of it. When we were kids, we loved it so much.
It's such a decadent treat, and the icing and the ego can be decadent, if you will.
It could be a treat. How about that? Rather than maltreatment, seeing it as a treat. So.
Oh, I love that. Yes.
Yeah. All right. So, do you want me to read the message now?
Yeah,
or
I think that would be great. Yeah.
All right.
Start
I'm
off
just going to grab a swig of water here. Okay. When you realize that you are not your ego, you open the door to new possibilities. You learn to identify with ego and even to identify yourself as ego early in your childhood development. Thus, it might come as a surprise to you to discover that this is not who you are. Who you are is more brilliant, beautiful, and powerful than you can imagine. Yet for many of you, your imagination is rarely directed at yourself. Without imagination, you believe the most surface things that you see, and that includes the idea of ego as you. For most of you, your ego becomes well developed over time, and until you can recognize it as a companion along life's journey and not as you will be limited in your understanding of yourself. Ego development is necessary to survive in your world. Ego allying itself with your true self. Your true you deep down inside is necessary for you to thrive as spiritual beings who are also human beings. You are spiritual merged with human, and your spiritual thriving depends on your understanding and living the truth of who you are. In that truth is great freedom. Freedom to be who you truly are. Freedom from all falsehoods and illusions of who you believe yourself to be. In this freedom is great strength, clarity, and wisdom. And in wisdom, you can easily see how to apply ego to solve some of your life's challenges. In wisdom, you can see how helpful ego is and also how damaging it is to allow it or encourage it to run amok. Although we speak of ego and true self as separate parts of you, they're not as distinct and separate as that. The difference between ego and true self is huge, but it boils down to the source from which you derive your choices and actions. What motivates your decisions and what steers your preferred outcomes? Ego is always attached to outcomes, to things and people. It can't help it. But when you are in the truth of who you are, there is no attachment to outcomes, although you may have preferences and desires. And in your true self, your attachment to others serve both your growth and theirs, and is based in the truth of who you are as a being sourced in love. This may sound deep or complex, but truly it is simple. What source are you living from now? Is it from unconditional love, from your pure essence, from your connection to us? All of these are different aspects, different ways of experiencing the same thing, which is the truth of who you are. With ego, things get more complicated, as it does its dance between separation and attachment. Learn to identify your source. When you can check within and know where you're coming from, you can learn to easily adjust and come back to the truth of who you are. Then you can always return home to you at any time and in any place. This does not mean that you have no purpose for ego. Instead, you have great purpose for it, asking it to be in service to your true self, to your higher calling, and to the purpose of living as the truth of who you are always. When you are in ego attachment, there is an urgency, a need for things to be a certain way, and a discomfort with what is. And your mind is actively filtering thoughts, ideas, and ways to control. Your mind can get into overdrive, obsessing and scheming. When you bring your true self, the inner you, to the same situation, there is peace instead of turmoil, stillness instead of mental activity, acceptance instead of attachment to outcomes, and ease instead of struggle. It takes time to cultivate this ability to start from the truth of who you are and to shift back into the true self when you wander from it. Then you can call on ego to be in service to your true self. You can simply pass the baton to ego when it is time for the assertion and expression of your ego aligned with the truth of who you are. This may seem difficult, but it can become automatic, second nature to you. All you need to do is to recognize the difference between sourcing yourself from your inner true self or from ego. Where am I coming from now is a good question to ask when you're making decisions or asserting yourself in any way. Learn to recognize where you are and to shift to who you really are. It takes practice to live and manifest from the power of the truth of who you are in combination with the skills of the ego. Yet, as ego and true self come together in connection with us, you can change your whole life and even your whole world. In great love, we are complete for now. Namaste.
Beautiful place to leave us. Ooh, I love that. The skills of the ego. Noemi, I like that.
I love it. I love it because ego, there was a long period of time where I was dissing the ego and I was judging, who does the judgment? I was judging people who I thought were too much in their ego. Yes. Not realizing that was me being too much in ego as I was judging them. I was the manifestation was a little different, but it was still imbalanced towards ego when I was judging all these people.
Yes. And when we think about that, if you say, are you judging the ego? Here's a neat thing. The skills of the ego really are to, is in the message, the skills of the ego are to be in service of the true self.
Yes.
And we often forget that one. That is the one skill that we often go, oh, no, that can't be. It can't partner with the true self. Go, you're an ego. But really, that's its super skill. That's its superpower, that it can ally with our true power source.
No, I like that. That's its superpower. Yeah, it so is. And we, so either or. Are you an ego, not an ego? And it's where the source is. Who's driving that bus, It's like...
Yeah.
And so I have this image of like this kind of really kind of almost, determined ego person driving the bus, passing people off, getting where it needs to be, asserting
Get out
itself.
of my way. and that's a great question. It says, start by asking, where am I coming from now? And we're going to use that word later, you guys, but the now word. But where am I coming from now is if we can stop ourselves in the moment and say, hey, life isn't going so well for me right now. Or even, hey, life is going really well for me right now. Where am I coming from? Oh, you like
That's
that?
a really excellent point, right? So sometimes it becomes easier to spot when we've created a mess. Oh, I must have been in my ego. But when life is going well, and if we are, become a little self-centered about it, and not that we shouldn't be centering on ourselves at times, but if we get self-absorbed with it, and look at me, I'm doing so well. I'm channeling on the radio, whatever it is.
Yep, could be.
Oh gosh, that would make me laugh actually. But it is, if the gloating is happening, or the looking at the other person, someone else, and going, they're not all that. That's the ego.
Yeah. The better than, that's a big one. The better than, ego is actually stepping in those conversations of the better than, because there's obviously a fear going on that, okay, I do want to be better than them, because if I'm not better than them, then I won't have this, and this, the safety, the acceptance,
yes.
Right? And so it's, that's a tricky one. That's actually a good thing to discuss. Like, if we've noticed that and we go, ooh, I was judging, and I just said I was better than them, but I don't want to be like that. How can we check in to, maybe this is for a channeled message when we come back, but how can we, when we recognize that the ego is taking it too far, it's kind of trying to protect us, it's doing its skill, but it's not coming from, it's going to start asserting itself in a way that it's not going to benefit us.
Yeah. Yeah, and so it's that awareness, and so sometimes we're in ego is driving the bus because we've turned over that baton, as it was in the message here. It's like, it's time. Ego, I need you to talk to this person, right? So even when you're confronting someone, there's that balance. There's that, when you can do it, right? I mean, I keep referring to that conversation we had, because it was such a great of when we were both frustrated about how long it was taking us to prepare, and it's such a great description, because without the ego, I wouldn't have ever said anything, and then you wouldn't have said anything. But we didn't let the ego drive the bus. We spoke from the heart and from the true self, and so. But without ego, I wouldn't have done it. I would have just curled up and been frustrated and continued to get more and more frustrated. So.
Yes. What it reminds me of actually is when you're a little kid and you're doing something, but then you come up to a point where you're like, I'm stuck. I can't. I'm not strong enough to open this Play-Doh jar. I don't know, something like you're doing it. You're ready to do it, but then you get stuck. So you ask a parent or somebody stronger to help. Could you just give me a little help? And then they say, well, just let me do it from here. And you're like, well, no. Like, you need that ego to step up and say, well, no, I'm doing this. I'm feeling really great about this. And I don't need you to take over for me, is the thing. Yeah.
Yes. And it isn't that stubborn ego of going, I can do it myself all the time. Don't tell me what to do. I can always do it myself. I can do it. I can do it. I can do it. And it's that I need to do it, that assertion. And so, I mean, it was interesting that they used the word assert in here because, to me, that would be a thought of asserting oneself, but it's asserting itself as in communication for the true self on behalf of. So it's kind of like the person that speaks on behalf of. But when we come from the heart, are we coming from the heart? I think it boils down to that simple thing. Are we coming from our heart, or are we coming from someplace else? And so when we're coming from the heart, it feels so different. We could be saying the same exact thing, but it comes across so different because love is being communicated rather than judgment.
Yes. Okay. I know we're going to commercial. I'll say this quickly. And then when we come back, then we'll start doing some other fun questions. But you know what is so funny? I was either this morning or yesterday. I can't remember. I had said something, but my guy heard it with a different tone. And he responded to me I felt oddly. And I was like, why is he answering me like that? That's so weird. And I said, excuse me. I go, what did you just hear? He goes, well, I heard this. I go, well, those are the words I said, but I wasn't saying it like that. and of course, you know what happened? Being very honest here, my ego stepped in and I said, your ears have a bad filter on them. I said, I would never say anything like that. Like this. So my ego jumped and went, okay, I'm not I would never, but then it was funny because then I went, oh, great, now I just did, and I shot myself in the foot. Right? So when we come back, I think that's a great thing when we think when people aren't responding to our truest self or ego, because maybe their ego's there. So let's talk about ego shifting when we come back. Access to angels and grace. Yes. Team angels. No.
Team Grace.
Team Grace, yes.
The Real Conscious Connection. OmTimes Radio. IOM FM. OmTimes Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OmTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
This is Kathy Beal, host of Celestial Compass, featuring astrology you can use. Celestial Compass points you to what's going on in the sky and what you can do with it down here on Earth. We also explore fun, effective, and cosmic tools for navigating this adventure we call life. Join me the first and third Monday of the month at 5 p.m. Eastern Time for Celestial Compass. It's enlightening, entertaining, and empowering.
My loves, you know you're here as a soul-led leader to transform this world through the sharing of your passions and gifts. You are here to be in your warrior of light and align your business with your highest self. I'm Rosalind Fung of the show Activate Your Soulgasmic Business. Let's elevate your business to the next expansive level. I invite you to flow into a business soul alignment discovery call with me at rosalindfung.com. That's ROSALYN, fun as in have some fun, FUNG, and let's see how I can best hold space for you to align your highest self, magnetize your dream clients, and monetize on your soul mission. I can't wait to connect.
COVID-19, brought to you by CDC and the Ad Council.
Do you feel like your emotions are all over the place? That's normal during this abnormal time. There are a number of ways to cope. Maintain a healthy routine, get enough sleep, eat nutritious food, and exercise at least 30 minutes each day. Schedule some time to talk with a friend or family member. And remember, you can always take a few deep breaths to feel more centered.
Find more self-care and coping tips at coping-19.org.
Alrighty, so we're going to jump right back in here. And I was laughing because I thought in the commercial breaks, we had Rosalind's music, which is so much fun. And then the next one says, to get 30 minutes of activity a day. And I'm thinking, I'm still dancing from that commercial.
You're counting it. You can do a chair dance.
Yes, exactly. It's getting your movement. A couple things. Okay, so we're talking about when I love this. When ego is serving us, serving our highest selves, when ego is our ally and is talking on our behalf, and when it also is getting a little loud. And it's so funny. I mentioned that little quick story there, that experience that I had, and I thought how quickly I wasn't in ego, but how quickly I jumped into ego to protect. Like, I think that's what happened. I was wanting to protect, like, wait a second, why did you think I would even think that? And that's your ears. You're hearing ego. That's not my ego. and so tricky because I wonder if, like, I could meet a brand new person standing right beside you, Noemi, and you'll meet them and I'll meet them, and then you'll walk away and then you could tell me what you thought of them, and I could tell you what I think of them, and it could be completely different.
Well, yes, because the filters, right? You said you told him that he had his ears had negative negative filters or something. So it is the filter. We filter everything, and so it is really, our perception is based on how we filter. So it is really important that we learn how to consciously choose our filters. And
yes, ooh,
and there is a chapter in my book about that. An Intimate Dialogue with God, the Miraculous Power of Unconditional Self-Love, has a whole chapter about filtering and filtering from love, particularly. So it really is, perception is everything. And not everything, but perception is how we experience everything. Without perception, we are then perhaps some animals, I don't know, but we are then just looking at the facts in the moment, right? We're there without perception. You're in the moment. You don't have a filter. You don't have anything. It's just, you're perceiving everything with the senses, and that's what you have. But with perception, what we see and what we experience, right, is not always completely 100% what's really going on.
Yes, I'm loving this. Yes, because ego has to choose its filter, how to best serve its purpose and its outcome. And where, maybe this might be a good channeling question, how can we ask our ego to come more from our true source? Can ego actually, first of all, Noemi, I'm going to ask you, can our ego actually come from our true source, or does it toggle between, do we toggle between going from ego and then our true self?
I think it's more the latter. I won't say it definitively, but I think it's more the latter, that are we living from the truth of who we are, right? Or are we living at that more surface layer of ego? And it becomes up to us to live from all of us, to live from all the layers, to not be just at the surface, or, getting so deep that you think there's no ego because you're so deep. And, at the tip of that iceberg, way at the bottom tip, oh, look at me. I'm not mirror. I don't do surface. I do deep. And yet if you don't have, you're just living at that bottom tip of the iceberg, then you're missing a whole lot of you as well.
Yes, looking around from the top, exactly, and having new experiences. Because the ego is a fun little thing too, because it says, I'd like to have an adventure. Let me try comparing to others. Let me see if I like this new or different thing, or let me get rid of something in my life. This is a fun one. We do need to use our egos at times to remove things, stop things, change things in our lives.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a partner.
It does assert, but yes, we do need it. I mean, like I said, if we didn't, I needed my ego to talk about being frustrated, because without it, I just wouldn't have done it. I would have been like, ooh, can't have that conversation. She might not love me anymore, and so that, and
acceptance.
and so it is that and when we can develop that relationship, here's something that for me is really standing out. When we can develop the relationship between the ego and who we truly are, Abraham calls it the inner being, but who we truly are at the depth of us. And then then the conversation, when it's like a united front, the conversation becomes much more loving and accepting, but yet standing in that truth, right? To stand in the truth, you need your ego. Otherwise we got no spine. So you can look at it as the spine, so it's to stand in that truth, right? Because they say, oh, they're spineless, that's a saying, right? So we can stand in that truth and yet speak in such a loving and compassionate way, and yet be absolutely truthful. We are not compromising ourselves in doing that. Being in the truth, which may not be the same as someone else's truth, but being in your truth and speaking from that place, and yet coming from love and acceptance, it is a skill, Yes. It is a skill to develop. And I've been on both sides of the pendulum. There was a time where I was, when I was younger, where I would just tell people what I thought. And if you didn't like it, too bad. Then I realized I was losing friends. So I thought, okay, some adjustment needs to be made. And I was getting my sisters angry with me and things like that. So some adjustment needs to be made. So then I realized, ooh, that's just, then I had a perception that was not a nice way to be. So then I became nice, and I didn't have anything to say, and I was okay with everything, but I wasn't, and then now it's that balance that I've been consciously choosing to develop, where I do, if there is a need to speak truth, I will speak it. And people have told me that that's what they know about me, that I'm going to speak truth. I'm going to speak truth, even if it's uncomfortable. But I've learned how to do that, how to use the ego to help me assert, but also to stay and to stand in that so I don't get knocked over, but also to come from love and come from the essence of who I am. And as I know myself to be, a gracious, loving presence is what the divine told me my essence was. And it took a long time to embrace that one. And some days I don't embrace it very well. But so we're coming from that grace and that love and speaking that truth and not watering it down and wishy-washying it. It's just, and that's a beautiful thing when you can do that. It offers the opportunity for somebody else, for them to be able to hear it. Like, it makes it so much easier for them to hear, because they don't feel, they're more likely to not feel attacked.
Right,
can't guarantee how someone's going to receive anything, but if you come from ego, right?
Yes. And what's interesting is when you said that about overcompensating with your sisters, perhaps, well, I just won't say anything then, I'll just keep my mouth shut, and you guys go on and do what you need to, and even though you're doing it wrong, I'll just watch you fail, basically, because I know that's why I guess so not fail, but not do it the way that I would. It's interesting because
interesting, yeah.
Yeah, because we can overcompensate because we think that, like, this is something to actually be a good question, is about when we go, okay, listening to Noemi here, listening to Lisa, and somebody's thinking, all right, the question was, where am I coming from now? And they, listeners are tuning going, yeah, I've been coming from like way too powerful of an ego, but it's not serving me. And perhaps the question would be like, once you recognize, so that you don't just simply overcompensate, wheel to the left, wheel to the right, that you, because that's still coming from, you're now hurting yourself. You're saying, okay, great, well, I don't want to hurt you, but okay, I'd rather hurt myself. That's still not the adjustment we're looking for. So how can we...
Right.
Yeah,
so that's a great point, right? How to not overcompensate. How to have that balance so we're not overcompensating.
Yes.
You know, and that balance is such a thing. It's a lifelong journey. You know,
trial and error.
Yeah.
Hopefully, sources can help us.
Yes, exactly. Okay, grab a swig of water, just to be clear. And no, this is not like it's
That's
not
how
one of
you're
those kind of channeling. No. It's not one of those kind of channeling. And then, in case this is your first time listening, just get silent for a moment and then greet the divine and turn it over to them. And we will hear what they have to say. Divine, this is such a great question. I'm excited to hear what you have to say about that balance, so it doesn't have to be such a swing the pendulum to the other extreme and then find our way. Can we find that balance without having to go to that extreme of overcompensating and maybe compromising ourselves? We love this question. This is a deep question. And we see balance as something most of you struggle with. You find yourselves on one extreme without intending to be there, and you overadjust. You overcompensate. If you were driving a car, you'd be taking out the cars on the left and cars on the right as you would learn to stay within your lane. And the lane is not something that is a rigid thing when it comes to you and your ego. It is not, stay within the lines. It is about being within the balance. Being within the balance is where there's a flow. Where there's a flow of appreciation, flow of gratitude, a flow of mutuality, a flow together, a communion. In that flow, ego offers, true self offers, and the alignment comes. So being in alignment with the truth of who you are and using your ego, consciously employing the ego to express what you need to express, to help you to stay within those lanes, but the alignment, you align with the truth of who you are. And ego is needed at the surface. Ego is needed at some levels of communication with those that cannot communicate from the heart yet, or who struggle there. But it's also needed. The ego, in service to the true self, will keep you on the path, will keep you in that alignment, will keep you driving in that lane. It will remind you to not compromise yourself, to not compromise your truth, to not give up on yourself. It is the choice how to express yourself. Do you allow your ego to assert itself with strength of ego, or do you come from the true power which is within you? That true power source, which is deep inside of you, recognizing that you need all of you to be fully expressing you, to be fully experiencing you. You need all of you. Some of you dismiss the ego. You rather not have anything to do with it. If you've been on what you call a spiritual path, we see all of you as being on a spiritual path, but some of you have this phrase, I'm on a spiritual journey, I'm on a spiritual path. If you see yourself there and then you dismiss ego, or you try to squash ego, that is of disservice to you, because ego is gifted and talented. And it is seek the balance, seek to be all of you, seek to not exclude any part of you, seek to experience all of you. Make that your motivation, make that to share all of you. To share, you can share your ego with others. Your ego has brilliance. Your ego has some great ideas. Your ego has learned different ways of doing things. And and that is really helpful to share it. So allowing yourself to become more integrated, not over on one side towards the ego, not over on the other side where you are so spiritual that you have lost your ability to communicate with those who are not necessarily recognizing that they are on a spiritual path. So seek that desire, become desirous of being all of you, to embrace all of you, to see all of you having value, and then come from your heart. Come from the truth of who you are. If you don't know what the truth of who you are is, then come from your heart, come from love, because the truth of who you are is aligned with love. It is an expression of love. It is a uniqueness of love. And so, are you coming from love? Are you coming from that source, that unconditional source of love and acceptance? Or are you coming from judgment? Are you coming from demandingness? Are you coming from neediness? Where are you coming from? Where is your motivation? Where is the driving force that is propelling you down that lane? Where are you going? Where are you coming and where are you going? If you're coming from ego, you're going to go somewhere that's going to be a different place than if you're coming from love, if you're coming from the heart of who you are, if you're coming from connection to us and the truth of who you are, then you will wind up in a different place. And so it is recognizing that it's all of you is valuable. All of you is beautiful. All of you has service. And yet recognizing that the depth of who you are is who you really are the most. Who you truly are at your deepest point is who you are in depth. Who you are, the truth of who you are. And so that person needs to be expressed. And that person that part of you, that aspect of you, that those attributes can be expressed through ego, through many different ways, allowing that part of you, all of you. And so it is an integration. To find balance is to integrate. If you are unintegrated, you are not balanced. Seek that integration. Learn to be in all of you. And this is a practice. It's like, don't leave any part behind. Ooh, am I leaving someone behind? Learn to be all of you. We have much more to say, yet we are aware that it is time to complete for this transmission. In great love. Namaste. Woo.
Ooh, beautiful. We'll
so
sync
much
those
there.
Commercials, but I have to leave. I love this last one as we go into them, is that integration. Don't leave ego behind.
Yeah, sort of like, don't leave anyone behind kind of.
That's right. We're not overcompensating, but we're not leaving ego behind either. So, yes, I've got some fun notes on that one when we come back. So, everybody, thank you so much for hanging in with us. We've got one more segment left on Access to Angels and Grace.
Look forward to continuing this dialogue.
Conscious media for conscious minds. OmTimes. Being a radio host on IOM-FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. OmTimes Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single OmTimes endeavor. Host your show with OmTimes Radio Network.
Consistently attract soulmate clients, begin showing up on brand, monetizing on your calling. Welcome all spiritual coaches, leaders, healers, light workers, and practitioners to a show that turns you on in your business and amplifies your magnetism. I'm host, catalyst, and spiritual business coach Rosalind Fung, and I'm here to journey with you into the juicy and help you discover where the real gaps are. Ignite your mindset and soul with strategies and systems as each episode takes you to the sweet spot that activates your soulgasmic business by tuning in on Tuesdays at 10 a.m. Mountain. Join me for your light language activation and let's magnetize and monetize.
So I'm a cat, and I just moved in with this new human, and she's got this little toy she's always playing with, all day long. Tap, 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 bloop, bloop. She can't put it down. There it is. Oh, and get this. She even talks to it. Last week, she asked it for Chinese, and guess what? egg roll showed up like magic. Humans have cool toys.
A person is the best thing to happen to a shelter pet. Be that person. Adopt. Brought to you by the Ad Council and the ShelterPetProject.org.
All right, Noemi, I have a fun question for you.
I love fun questions.
This really is neat. I would so it's almost like an interview question, but that's okay. Is there a time in your life where you can think about an example where you continue doing the exact same thing, but because you switched and started coming not from just ego or ego on steroids, but you started coming from ego with a little bit of ego, but now from your true power source, your true aligned with love. Is there an example? I'm going to try to think of one too. Is there an example of something that you did differently? I have one actually, differently that when you did switch.
Why don't you share first then, since you have one right there? Okay. You've been thinking about it.
I just thought this was perfect. So, and it's such a girl thing. That's okay. Well, it could be a guy thing too. But so this is years ago. I remember starting doing this. I started dry brushing. So your skin, your legs, right? So I was dry brushing, but I was dry brushing because it was a total vanity thing and I wasn't good enough and my legs aren't nice and I need to fix them. And and you know what happened as I was doing it, and every time I was brushing, I was in that, I hate my legs. I hate how I look. I hate this thing. And it was I really hated dry brushing because, I was just really being down on myself. It was really ego. I was comparing myself. I was not aligned with love. And this is like 15 years later. I still dry brush. And now, and it's been years that I switched and started, I was like, wait a second. I'm doing something so beautiful for my lymphatic system, for my heart, for beauty reasons as well. But why can't I do this with love? Like I care about myself. I want to live longer. I want to feel better. I want to all these wonderful things. And so now it's such a treat, like what we talked about earlier. It's so icing and not lumpy icing, but now I'm doing the same thing, and even for a little bit of the same reasons, but from a different place, and it's a lighter, more beautiful. And I talk about it more. Before I was in shame. Oh, don't tell anybody that I'm dry brushing. Oh, I'm trying to fix myself. But now I'm like, oh, everybody, have you done dry brushing? Like it's this. It's a non-shameful thing.
I have to say that I have not done dry brushing.
You got to try it.
Well, I just might. So, for me, what's interesting with that question is I feel different on the inside. And I have to say that since we started that Living Beyond Wounds series, so much, as we are having this dialogue, Lisa, and we're sharing our experience and I'm channeling, I'm deepening and I'm changing and I feel different on the inside. I have noticed that I have responded to things in a different way. Even being angry in a different way, angry in a way that isn't attacking the other person and putting them down. But right now I am angry, with you and being, and this is why, and being able to say it calmly and then actually not even being attached to the anger so much has been really, because I'm different on the inside, I'm coming from a different place. So what we're doing here, we get to dive into it, yes, beforehand and after, in between and after. And so I feel different on the inside. I don't know if I seem different on the outside. I can't, right? Just like your brushing doesn't seem different on the outside, but it feels so different on the inside in things that have happened, where I would have maybe had my feelings hurt, in the past. It was just like, oh, okay. My sister who lives in New Jersey and I live in Massachusetts was coming to New Hampshire, and those of you in the U.S. know where these places are, and to a lake, and it's only 2 hours from my house, but she was driving there with my other cousin, and then like a the day she's driving, she's like, "Oh, why don't you come up and see us?" And I was like, I was completely booked. And I did go up. I did decide to be spontaneous and move, ask a few clients for grace and move them to different spots, and they were all gracious. But in the past, I would have been like, well, how come she didn't invite me earlier? And if you're listening, Julie, I love you, because she does listen. And this is not at all, you didn't do anything wrong. It wasn't wrong. It was, she thought of it and said, it hadn't occurred to her before, so there's nothing wrong about that. But I would have been like, oh, she didn't invite me. I could be there. It's so close, Yes, she invited me. I had a great time. It was a great time. And we had lobster. We did, we hiked. It was just gorgeous. And it was, I received that whole last minute invite, in a very different way than in the past, where I would have felt like, she's going and she didn't ask me. And, it was probably not that distant past where I would have felt that way. And I was able to have such a great time, and she had such a great time. We were so thrilled because we don't see each other that often, because she lives 5 hours away. But it was a beautiful time to have that, because it was different on the inside for me.
Our egos can certainly make us miss out on a lot of things. That's right. If you were, too much in that, you'd be like, no way, she should have thought about that earlier and asked me. That was a horrible thing, and now she doesn't like me, and I'm not going. But I love this.
Well, yeah, I might have made her feel bad before. I might have been like, well, it certainly would have been a lot easier if you had thought of me earlier, something like that, which is the thoughtless thing to say. She thought of me. That was beautiful. And so there's so much more acceptance. And when it's just different on the inside, and it is different on the inside. It is seeking that balance. I really had swung too far and just, from like being too nice, but now I find myself being nice without trying to be nice.
I like, yes.
Because, being nice is not something I necessarily seek to be. As a psychotherapist, I think I've said to other therapists, I think you're being too nice right now. You need to tell the client, set some boundaries,
Right. Yes. And you know what you said there in the beginning, which I think it's perfect, is that you said, learned how you can now be angry in a different way. So it's not that you never get angry. It's not like, oh, I'm a saint now and nothing bothers me and I'm perfect.
Well, yes.
You're just like, no, I truly am angry. However, I'm not attached. We were going to talk about attachment in the present moment, but you had said something, I want to sneak this in, about the present moment. And you were saying something, an epiphany about being
today.
Yes.
Today. Yeah. The ego takes you out of the present moment. And so there are family reunion type things that are happening, after a year plus of not having things, and certain pivotal events, one of those birthdays with zeros on the end, and my mother-in-law being recently having my father-in-law deceased, so she's needing wanting us to come and visit, and it's all coming together at times that are going to be right back to back, and it just felt like too much because they all live distance away, and I was just like, so overwhelmed with this, and I just found myself going back, and my other sister was texting with me, and we're back and forth, and I'm thinking, well, if I could go on this weekend here, and I could do that, and what if I switched there, and what about Thanksgiving, and I just start to. This is all stuff for October, November, but it's not even September yet, but I got totally consumed this morning, and I was like, we got a show today. Wow. Yes. And you notice I slipped something. I said it's not yet December. It is not September yet. We are pre-recording this show for September 13th. So it will be September when it comes live.
Because somebody is having a birthday. But
so now you tell the whole world when my birthday is.
I didn't say that.
I will not be offended by that.
But I love that you're acknowledging that. We get so worked up, and especially even about Christmas, like people start planning even a year in advance or anything, or even when somebody's planning a wedding and they have to plan that, in a year in advance, or you really can get taken away. So when the ego takes you out of the present moment, if we could just have a quick little help on that one.
Yes. Let's dive into a question. So what's the question? Give me the question, please.
Well, how can we ask the ego to be present in our present moment, but just not take the front stage?
Okay.
Or stay there too long.
Okay. I'm just going to dive into that connection with the divine. So, what was your question again?
Oh,
I like to write it down because
how can
to
the
remind
ego,
myself.
How can we be in the present moment and have the ego be there with us, but not either take the stage forever?
Yes. Yeah, I write these questions down so I can remember what I channeled, because I don't always remember, because I then write down a quote that came through, or approximation of a quote, and with the link for the replay. So that's why I am writing it down, but I am turning it over.
I have a question. Here it is. Inviting the ego to the present moment to serve our truest power, our truest self.
Okay. And I'm just thinking, is the ego even interested in that? So, that's, that was sort of my probably ego reaction. All right, so I'm going to dive in as we are with our few precious minutes of channeling time with the divine. So, we love this question. Yes, the ego is interested. That is a dismissal of the ego, and we have mentioned not to dismiss the ego. The ego is more interested in the truth of who you are than you think. The ego gets threatened. The ego feels threatened by many things, and that is why it takes its stand, or it retreats and retracts. It tries to preserve. It tries to cause you to survive, to be the one that can survive whatever is happening. And so the ego is interested. The ego is concerned. The ego is desiring to be of service. And so you may not think so, but the ego will react. The ego gets reactive. The ego can be impulsive. And so what its greatest desire, which is to be fully expressed, and the way to be fully expressed is to be fully expressed through alignment with the true self. But the ego gets distracted. It feels threatened, and so it wants to survive. And then it shifts into survival mode. When you have this phrase, being in survival mode, know that your ego is hyperactive when you are in survival mode. And so the ego needs to know that there is nothing threatening it. And then it is easy for it to be in service. But the ego needs that love. Treat the ego as a younger child that may need a younger part of you, that may need encouragement, that may need that extra nurturing. And allow it to recognize that you are with it, and that you are available to it, and that you are there for it. And so the ego does want to be of service, but the ego firstly wants to survive. The ego needs to survive. The ego needs to take care of your survival. It is the protector. It will focus on your survival. And so to help you, do not make choices that put you at risk of not surviving. And we don't mean don't jump out of airplanes, and we know people do with parachutes, and it works well for them, and there's an enjoyment there. We're saying do not make choices that hurt you. Do not consciously or unconsciously make those choices. Learn from them. Learn when you have made choices that lead to pain and suffering. Learn what those choices look like so you can choose something different the next time. And so when you start to choose what is more in alignment with you, you free the ego to get out of survival mode, to get out of protective mode. And you free the ego to do its higher calling. It too has a higher calling, just as you do. The ego, that aspect of you, has a higher calling to be in service to the highest part of you. And so choose what brings you peace. Choose what brings you joy. Choose what brings you into communion with us. And with the truth of who you are. And then you start to free ego. Ego will not be on the defensive. Ego will not be guarded. Ego can relax and be of service to your true self. This is a message that we want you all to receive because it is so important in that finding of that balance and integration. And we love you so much, and we look forward to the continuation of this conversation. Great love. Namaste. Wow.
Beautiful. Aww.
That was beautiful.
Yes, that is powerful, powerful message to share with everybody as we say goodbye for now. But the ego is in hyper mode when it's being threatened. That is such a helpful thing to understand.
And that it has that higher. It too has a higher purpose.
Yes.
To be of service, but it's going to be in that survival mode, in that protection mode.
Yes. So beautiful.
I thought that's beautiful. I never heard that before. It's like I'm hearing new things. I love it.
Well, thank you, Divine. We so appreciate, channeling through. And Noemi, thank you so much for
sharing
thank
you,
messages.
Lisa.
Aww. Thank you, everybody, so much. We'll see you in another 2 weeks.
Yes, September 27th.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Blessings.